And it looks like we are on. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. We are doing this live on YouTube, so I'm kind of hoping that the tech has worked and you guys can see us. Ashwin will tell me whether it's working, but welcome to the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, brought to you by Seat Tires. Ashwin, how are you doing, man? It feels like it's been a long week already. So, how are you doing? What's going on?
Honestly, man, kudos to you for figuring out the tech. Usually, for our listeners, we have the IVM guys helping do the production and things on the back end. We just decided, I think, 15 minutes ago, let's go live. And I don't yet think there's that many people watching us, but that's okay. We're live. I'm good, man. We're going to talk about it, obviously, but it's been a pretty big week of sport and including this morning, Cristiano Ronaldo makes his comeback for Manchester United. This is probably polarizing because, of course, United is a polarizing team, but I am a Manchester United fan. So watching him score 2 goals in a 4-1 victory was just phenomenal. And then, of course, the US Open is going on. You and I are both pretty big tennis fans. The finals this afternoon of the women's US Open is a British, which is your, of course, adopted country, versus a Canadian, both teenagers, both unseeded players. So it's been pretty exciting. I was hoping to round that out with being on day 2 of the 5th test match. But of course, that is not currently happening. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
No, it's not. And CEO Sir Varun is in Germany. His first holiday in, I think, about 18 months. So I think he's probably got a good excuse for missing this episode. We'll try and get him on later for sure. But yeah, Ashwin, you've mentioned the Manchester Test cancellation. So we're going to talk about the Manchester Test match being cancelled. We're going to talk about India's T20 squad. We're going to talk about the IPL, which starts in less than a week. I can't believe that it's coming so quickly. It comes thick and fast, doesn't it? But first up, I'm going to ask you for... let's leave all the kind of jingoistic, let's blame the Indians for the IPL, let's blame the English for... the 100, let's blame the 9-day break between the test matches, let's blame Ravi Shastri's book launch. What is, as a fan, Ashwin, your first reaction to a test match that we were all geared up for, right? Like, we talked last week and we talked about India winning 3-1. And I think you were so pumped you actually went up to 3-1 from your initial 2-1 prediction. And it all looked like it was going ahead until a couple of hours, Ashwin, before the test match was scheduled to start on Friday, which was yesterday. What is your first reaction to that, as simply as a fan who's sort of been robbed of a test match, a grand finale, so to speak?
Yeah, I think just disappointment more than anything, right? It takes a little bit of the zip out of this series. Whether, all results in the series were still possible. India could have won. Well, not England couldn't have won, but England could have drawn it and at 2-2, which would have been a great accomplishment for them. India could have, of course, won in England to get to 3-1 or drawn to hold it at 2-1. So it takes a little bit of the zip out because now we're talking about, is it a forfeit? Is it a cancellation? Who takes the brunt? Does it get rescheduled if it's a postponement? All the logistics. And it just takes away from the heart of it, which is the cricket, right? And so we ended that 3rd test match. I was talking, including to my British friends, by the way, who said, you ended that 3rd test match feeling this is what makes test cricket so unbelievable, right? The comeback, the Rohit century overseas, like all the magical moments. And it takes a lot of the zip out of it, I think, unfortunately, that we lost out on the chance to have a 5th test. So disappointed more than anything, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, also, Ashwin, remember there was, you mentioned it very briefly, but when the statement first came out, it said in the ECB statement that India had forfeited the test match because they were unable to put a team out. Now, let's get a little bit into the detail of that. There's a great article by George Dobell, which we'll put in the show notes, and we'll put a link in the show notes to that, about abandoned, cancelled, forfeited, postponed, what the different permutations are and what it means for the ECB's financial health, which is, let's be honest, Ashwin, that's what's driving all this chatter. I mean, for the fans have lost out on the cricket. It, as you said, it took a little bit. It's been a great series. I mean, it's been a fantastic series. And it's a bit sad that we're sitting here talking about insurance and cancellations and scheduling and all of that stuff. The cricket that was played in that series was magnificent. Like for you and me to be sitting there screaming at our TVs on day 5 of the
And
Lords and Oval
that's
Test.
the thing, right? It was just such a high level of cricket, including, by the way, from England when we lost that match. They brought their best. Joe Root was performing phenomenally. Rohit century. Kohli starting to find form again. The Indian quicks. It's a great story that unfortunately, like, not dissimilar to when things like sandpaper gate happen, etc. Great cricket, and then it completely gets overwhelmed or overpowered by the news and the headlines that get created. So that's the disappointing thing for me as a fan of the game. Disappointing, but so many things now to deal with because we just haven't, like, everything about the last 18 months or so has been unprecedented, both in all our personal lives and in the world of sport. And again, this is something we have to deal with. Does a team have to consider it a forfeit if there were cases of COVID in the support staff? And anyway, lots to uncover. You know more about it than me. You're the lawyer here, so I'd love to hear your point of view.
Yeah, the George Dobell article puts it through very clearly, actually, because the playing conditions say, so the laws say if you're unable to field a team, you have to forfeit the game. But the playing conditions for the series said that if there's a COVID outbreak, the World Test Championship playing, if there's a COVID outbreak in the team, that's an acceptable reason for a test series or a test match to be cancelled. Now, the crucial point here, Ashwin, is that there wasn't a COVID outbreak in the team itself. None of the players were tested positive. Who tested positive? Ravi Shastri at the Oval Test match. The first physio, I think Nitin is his name, he went down first up. And then the second physio, who'd been working on players like Rohit Sharma, Cheteshwar Pujara, and others, went down got a positive test after initially getting a negative test. And that is what put the fear of a COVID outbreak into the team. Now, the legal question around that, which I think the ICC has got to arbitrate, is whether the fear of a COVID outbreak is sufficient for that cancellation to take place or whether it should be a forfeit. And I mean, frankly, the fact that we're talking about all this, the fact that Indian players have got up and left for the IPL, that there's people have lost out financially, Lancashire is struggling financially, the ECB is to refund ticket holders, fans have gone there with I mean, it's basically like having a test match entirely ruined by rain, right? Like you've booked your tickets there by train, you've booked your accommodation, you bought your tickets, and you've just sat and watched the train for 5 days, which is pretty sad. But I mean, after all the initial like sort of communication, it seemed like there was some sort of resolution. We still don't know what the series result is conclusively. We don't know whether it's 2-1. We don't know whether it's 2-2. It's definitely not 3-1 because they haven't played that test match, but it could be next year if they continue the series. There have been contradictory statements coming from both sides. The ECB chairman has said, oh, it's going to be a one-off test if it's postponed and played next year. And then he's sort of backtracked on that and said that, well, maybe it's going to be finished next year. We have zero clarity. So you, me and Varun are all still in the game for the final analysis, right? But it's just, let's talk about the cricket, Ashwin, first. Let's look back at the series. Let's look at the more positive side of things, because there's also a very good Jared Kimber article video, Last Knock, which I'll again put in the show notes. It talks about the mental aspects and the scheduling of cricket and how these players go from bubble to bubble to bubble, and then they are human. Their mistakes are amplified manifold. You saw what happened to the Sri Lankan team. They were banned for a year, which is, I mean, it's crazy because they were in a bubble, and the three teams that have left tours midway are the big three. I mean, what are the chances of that, right? Like India has just left England. England had left South Africa, and Australia didn't tour. Where were they supposed to go? I think Bangladesh, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting video. I'll put a link to it. So I don't want to get into that, but let's talk about the cricket, Ashwin. Out of all the England Test series we have watched, where would you place this one firstly?
Man, I don't have the memory you do, so I'm probably going to forget some of the iconic ones. It's got to be up there, right? Like, I think the fact that it ends open-ended and that there's no conclusion as to whether it's 2-2, 2-1, 3-1, all that, but it's got to be up there, man. The way this team fights, the way like, I'm just thinking through our reactions over the course of the series, forgetting that, like, after Lords, we were on top of the world. After Leeds, it felt like somebody had like kicked you in the stomach or a little bit south of there. And then, coming out of the Oval again, you just felt like you were on top of the world, and you just felt like this team can accomplish anything. And I actually don't remember the last time, or if it ever happened, that I've been watching Team India in England feeling like this team can accomplish absolutely anything. So it probably the most exciting for me, but for the finish.
And the open-ended nature of it, as Aditya Kulkarni in the chat has pointed out, it leaves you a little bit like a Netflix series, when like you've just finished season 1 and then you're looking forward to season 2, but we don't know whether there will be a next season of this. But Ruben Loganathan actually asked the question that's on many people's minds, right? Ashwin, how big a part has the upcoming IPL in a week played in that decision to move? Because the English fans are very annoyed by this. To be clear, Manchester was meant to be a bubble, and so they went straight from Manchester into the UAE without the need to quarantine. Right?
Okay, I don't think I realized that. Okay, yeah.
So that would have not been an issue. So I'll put a link to the tweet which confirms that. Because the bubble there wasn't a bubble formed at all, really, and it was breached clearly. There was COVID with the physio. They've now flown players over, chartered flights, done all of that stuff, and they're doing a 6-day quarantine. Is it fair to say that the IPL played a big part in the cancellation, postponement, forfeiture, abandonment, whatever we want to call it? And if it did, what is the solution to that? Because and that's what Jared says in his video, we don't cancel series anymore. We just keep postponing them indefinitely. The IPL has been postponed. The T20 World Cup, it's back to back to back to back. There's no let up for these players who go from one bubble to another, which is what Dinesh Karthik said as well. So tell me about the IPL and its effect on this series.
I guess I think, so bias, disclaimer, I'm an Indian fan, all that, want to give benefit of the doubt. I guess I think if for anybody to imply that the IPL was the reason India wanted to cancel this 5th match, etc., either suggest one of two things. Suggests A, this has been orchestrated for a long time. Because you could have easily, when you decided to, let's say prior to the start of the series, once this IPL date was locked to starting September 19th, at that point, you could have worked with England and said, we're going to shorten it to a 4-match series so that we have enough time, etc. At that point, we could have been arguing, hey, why would you cut a test match for the IPL and all that stuff? But it doesn't feel like anybody would deliberately plan a 5-match series, plan for that 5th test, etc., and then happen to make a last-minute change because of the IPL. So I don't fundamentally want to believe, maybe that's just me being wishful, but I don't want to believe that anything was orchestrated from the get-go to enable this. So let's start there. Then you get to, okay, given that the COVID outbreak happened, among support staff, given that it was looking iffy and it was not, playing, whether they played or not, we got to a point where there would have been critics, right? Let's be honest. If India did field a team, even though they had negative tests and stuff, there would have been folks saying, this is not safe. This is not the right thing to do. You can't put fans and officials and broadcasters and of course the England team at risk, because it could take a couple of days before the test starts showing positive and all of those things. So when you say, okay, given that and the IPL coming out and the fact that India was in the lead, etc., did it play a little bit of a factor in saying, hey, forget it, not worth it to do both things, risk it and then risk the IPL and etc.? Maybe. But I have a hard time believing you would. Of course, IPL is a priority. All these people are saying, look at these players, IPL prioritized over test. Of course, it's a priority. You make a lot of money. The 100 was a priority. It happened during the same season as the test series, etc. But to imply that you had orchestrated this whole thing in order to get a couple of days extra at the IPL, that feels like a stretch to me. So that's where I'm at.
And so I got a question today from one of my colleagues at work. They asked me, do you think that if India had lost the Oval Test match or had drawn the Oval Test match, would this have been postponed or cancelled? Because that seems to be where a lot of the steam is coming from. That it's like, it's my bat, my ball, I'm out, I'm going home, right?
But it's a home series for ECB, for the ECB.
But the Pataudi Trophy is coming home if it's 2-1, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we can spend all day on hypotheticals. The truth is, everything probably is in the back of somebody's mind as you're making the decision. It's a tough decision regardless. But yeah, if you had to make a call to not field a team because of COVID shares, it definitely makes it a little easier being up in the series than being down. It's hard, but it's true.
That is the truth. And I'd actually said that we won't get distracted by it, but we got distracted by the chat. Let's go back to the cricket. Ashwin, the highs for India. Talk me through the players. Name 2 players, Ashwin, from India out of the players that have played in this series that you thought really made a massive impression on you.
Probably the cliche answer, but unquestionably Rohit. First overseas century,
top scorer, 350
top scorer
plus
for India, averaged over 50, made I don't have it in front of me, but he made a lot of he made more than he's lasted for 100 balls for 4 innings in a row. So it was not just about that century, is my point. Right? Great century to kind of cap it all off, but unbelievable series for him. I think we've talked about him extensively on the show. And then if I was to pick a bowler, like with an honorable mention to Shardul at the end, I would pick Bumrah. And the reason is, coming into the series, we forget, memories are so short, but coming into the series, everybody was saying, oh, is he overrated? We thought he was so great. Then he had a rough time in the last couple of series. Has he lost his mojo? Has he lost his spunk? And he had this fire, which was just unbelievable to see. So we're going to be previewing the IPL next or later in the show. I don't love that I picked 2 Mumbai players, but as Team India fans first, for the test team, Bumrah was just standout. Also the highest wicket taker. So I guess I picked the easy statistical answers, but he picked up 18 wickets, averaged 20. And just, it wasn't so much even about the stats with Bumrah. It was about the fire and the times at which he took the wickets was always game changing, always high impact. So Rohit and Bumrah for me. Would you have different players?
Rohit's definitely an absolute revelation. I think he probably overshadowed KL a little bit by the end of it, but KL sort of started off on a high and then tailed off. He got 80 odd in the first game and then got 100 in the second game. So he had big expectations of KL. He didn't get another 50 for the rest of the series. But I think Rohit, unquestionable, the man of the series for India with the bat, the man who stood up. And you said it's not just recency bias. He's been consistent throughout, even starting from the World Test Championship. You could see he was getting those 30s, 40s. He converted those to 50s and then eventually a big 100, which was great to see. I'd say Bumrah as well, of course, just magnificent. And recency bias kicks in there because the only 2 balls I remember of the series now are the 2 Bumrah in-swingers, which was just absolutely ballistic. Yeah. Like, I can't remember another ball.
It's about the moments that stay with you, right? And that's the high-impact moment. So anyway,
yeah. Brilliant. But then I want to ask you about the players you felt let India down a little bit, Ashwin. And we can't talk about Ravichandran Ashwin because he was left out. So I think he was let down by the Indian team. He didn't get a game. He may have got a game in the 5th test, but tell me about the 2 players that I thought didn't
I've said
live
this
up
before
to their potential.
About Ashwin, by the way, that like this happened with Rahane in South Africa a few years ago. But when you're on the bench, your market value shoots up because all the media, the pundits, the commentators, the fans, everybody's saying, if Ashwin was playing then. And so even without playing, his market value has actually gone up. I think the disappointments unquestionably was one was Rahane. And I can channel my inner Varun on this show to say his time should be done. He just didn't stand up. I don't have the stats in front of me.
So that duck is the last you think we're going to see of Rahane in Test cricket?
No, maybe for now, but I don't think it's the last word. I think that's a big claim to make. He's still our vice captain, isn't he?
Correct.
Like that's a lot to. But yeah, he made 109 runs in 7 innings at an average of 15. Just not nearly good enough, right? Jasprit Bumrah's average in the series was higher than it. Let's take the batting average, right? So Rahane unquestionably, and then I have to say with the ball, probably Ishant, right? He had one good match, the first one he played, which was the first match of the series, and then he had one subpar match, and he just didn't look like himself in his second outing, and obviously ended up getting rested, rotated, dropped, whatever the word is you want to use. But it has to be Ishant for me with the ball. I'm not going to think about, like, Umesh had a great run. Shardul looked good. And Shardul, of course, with the bat as well. So Shami looked good in the 3 matches he played. Siraj, had his ups and downs. But it has to be Ishant for me. So I think about it a lot. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, you seem to have picked the two. Rahan is just the obvious one, right? He seems like the culprit. It seems like an easy one. I wish Jadeja had done a bit more and Pant had done a bit more, to be honest, with the bat. But you
Mhm.
can't complain. They both contributed. Pant was magnificent behind the sticks. I can't remember a single catch that he dropped.
Yeah, agree. He wasn't a disappointment for me because he's typically a disappointment behind the wickets, right? That's typically
Yeah.
where he's disappointed, and he stepped up so much. I mean, anyway, we always assess our wicket keepers with their batting, and that's the nature of the current world of cricket. But if you step back and assess him for his wicket keeping, where we criticize him, we have to praise him for the phenomenal keeping. So fully agree.
And so we've talked about the Indian side. England's
And
man
just
of the
quickly
series.
before you move on to England, a couple of comments coming in. Smayan is saying, in addition to Rohit, Shardul, of course, and then he did say Jadeja with the bat actually didn't impress him, which I think is a little bit harsh, but
Mm.
I get it. So sorry,
Expected a
coming to
bit
England.
more, I think, from him. Yeah, I was going to say England. I mean, Joe Root, my head and shoulders above everyone else, right, with the bat.
Honestly, the only guy who impressed with the bat. I think Bairstow had one good outing, Burns had one, Hamid had one, but you're talking about among 8 innings, right? So or 7 innings, I guess they beat us by an innings in one match. But yeah, just horrendous. So Joe Root is the only player I would highlight.
And with the ball, who would be your pick from England? Would it be Jimmy Anderson, Ollie Robinson,
I mean, I think
someone
if you look
else?
at the numbers, it has to be Robinson. But as much as I hate it, you have to like if you think about the moments and the specific wickets and the specific balls that changed the match, it was Jimmy Anderson, right? And so we've said this on the show before. Don't like him as a person, but can't help but love him or respect him as a cricketer. And he's just a magician with the Duke's ball. So I have to give it to him.
Is that the last we've seen of Kohli versus Anderson?
I mean, this fifth test might still get played. It might be next
Next
summer.
year? You
So
think?
if the series gets wrapped up and it either considered an India forfeit or a cancelled test, then probably the last we see of Anderson versus Kohli, which again is just a sad ending. I think if they do the series, even if it's next year, Anderson will stick around.
Okay, and talk to me about Kohli's series. What did you make of that? Because
I think,
it's something we just gloss over, right? Like we just
yeah,
have such massive expectations of the guys. When he scores
yeah,
runs, it's par for the course. When he doesn't score runs, it's like it's on its way. But I think I said it's a matter of time. But
yeah.
was that a fair assessment?
I agree with it, but that's again me wanting to agree with it also, like and us being fans of our skipper and Kohli and etc. And but I think his series sort of took an upward trajectory, right? Maybe not quite with the stats, but as you saw him, he kept looking more and more comfortable, looked better and better, and that's the nature of a champion, right? You see, he's the guy who can bat 6 hours, and if he gets out to a bad shot, he's back in the nets that same night. We've talked about this other sports, but when Novak Djokovic loses a match, which I can't remember the last time he has, but he's back on the practice courts the same evening, right? That's who Kohli is. So
Olympics.
you,
He lost in the
yeah,
Olympics.
yeah, correct, of course. But he's on his way to making history tomorrow, man. I'm ready for it. But so I felt like Kohli got better and better through the course of the series, and so while he wasn't at his best, I felt he certainly wasn't a Rahane-esque bad form, or even not as bad as Pujara, right? He was up there and he looked good to me.
And I mean, the two victories that India had were absolutely magnificent, emotionally charged. Both bowling victories on day 5 of the Test matches, after making comebacks, after conceding leads, after losing tosses. So it was a very convincing performance. But the Test we lost in Headingley was pretty. There was the hint of a fight back. So that concept of fighting back when you're down seems to have really come back. The last question I want to ask you on this series, Ashwin, before we go to a break and then move on to the India World T20 squad and the IPL preview. There's been some accusation that India doesn't care about Test cricket. That's why they've called off this series and gone to the IPL. The T20 is taking over the IPL. Let me give you my take on that. I feel that it's really unfair because Kohli and his team have been here since May. They've been in bubbles and living away from families, etc. For quite a long time. The A team has come to play Test cricket. They sent their B team or C team to Sri Lanka by the end of it. And Kohli's always said that Test cricket is the most important thing. And there's a great article, I think, in The Guardian, which talks about how India's propping up Test cricket and the importance that they're giving to it keeps it alive, keeps interest in it alive. So is there any fairness in the accusation that this series was not being prioritized by the Indian cricket team by the end of it, and that's what led to the cancellation?
Honestly, I think there's zero fairness to that. It's not at all. Anybody who has watched cricket for the last, let's call it 3 to 5 years, anybody who's watched any of the cricket should know how important Test cricket is to India, period. There's no question about it. The IPL is important, yes. The nature of the world we live in and the life we have and all our business priorities, etc., is that they're competing priorities. And the IPL is important, as is the 100 in England. But that does not at any point suggest to me that the Indian Cricket Board or players think the IPL, Test cricket is unimportant. So I want to put this to bed. There's no question mark in my head whatsoever.
Yeah, and just the last point on this, I think Kohli plays the IPL every year. But winning a Test series in England, it's probably something he's dreamed of for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's insane to think that he would have picked getting to Dubai. They were still good. There was a plan to play both, right? So it's insane to think they would have prioritized the first couple of days of the IPL to have a little bit more time in Dubai. It's nuts. There's nothing to it.
And there you have it, guys. That is the wrap on the England versus India Test series. Or is it? We don't know yet. Maybe it's going to be played next year. Maybe there's a full stop put against it. An exclamation mark. Who knows where we're going to go? But it's been a great ride. For Indian cricket fans, we've had the highs of Lords, the lows of Headingley, and then followed by the highs of the Oval. So we've gone in a V shape. V for Virat, V for victory. And that is the first third of the show done. So we will see you straight after this break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back from that break, and you're still listening to the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, brought to you by Seat Tires. In the first third of the show, we just talked about India's tour of England, which ended in dramatic circumstances last Friday with the Manchester Test match being cancelled. But before that, Ashwin, in the same week, there was more news. It doesn't end. The Indian World T20 squad was announced, Ashwin. So, should we just run through our thoughts on that? There were some fairly interesting selections and some pretty big omissions, plus some new appointments. And I am very happy about the last one because MSD is back in the fold.
The appointment specifically. Yeah, of course. I think it's been interesting, right? Let me go through the squad really quickly and I'll share a couple of thoughts. So from a batting standpoint, the certainties, Kohli, Rohit, Rahul, Sky, who is now a certainty, but probably wasn't even a few months ago, but Suryakumar Yadav, Rishabh Pant. Great. Solid top 5, not necessarily in that order, but in terms for the total squad. Ishan Kishan made the cut. Great. Very happy for him. I think they have recognized to win against sides like the West Indies, you need not just batsmen who can bat fast, but specifically 6 hitters. And so they've got Kishan and Hardik, and they're both big 6 hitters, which is great. Then you go to all-rounders. Jadeja, no question. We've talked about him many times on the show. You had a couple of surprises as it came to the spinners then, right? Your 3 other spinners were Akshar Patel, who is kind of a backup for Jadeja. So happy for him as a Delhi player. And he works hard. He deserves it. But that was a little bit of a surprise to me. Ravi Ashwin.
Can I just ask you a question on Akshar's selection?
Yeah.
You've already got Jadeja in the team.
Yeah.
Why have you got another left-arm spinner who does exactly the same thing? I mean, forget Krunal, who didn't make it. Well, why are we playing Akshar as well?
I think he's back
in the
up
main
for
squad,
Jadeja.
not a part of the reserves.
Yeah. I think he's back up for Jadeja.
You could replace him if he gets injured. Why have we got him in the main squad?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if he fully is to justify his spot in that team. I think Krunal has had a bad run recently. So maybe they wanted to play 2 lefties and they just decided Akshar gets in slightly ahead of Krunal. But honestly, I don't have a great answer to that question. Rounding out the spinners was Varun Chakravarti. So excited for him. Also a unique opportunity. But of course, that means one of India's most successful spinners over the last decade in T20 cricket Yuzvendra Chahal has missed the cut. And then with the quicks, Bumrah, no question. Shami, no question, I guess. And then Bhuvneshwar Kumar. Excited to see him come back in. The standby players, have been Shreyas Iyer, who I feel was a little hard done. Shardul Thakur, who arguably was also a little hard done. I mean, I think he's shown his chops, but definitely more with the red ball than the white. And Deepak Chahar, who was a big surprise for me, where I would have potentially slotted him in for Ashami because of what he showed, not his ability, not just with the ball, but of course with the bat, with that magnificent innings in Sri Lanka. So that's the side. We can, the surprise picks, I guess, Akshar, which we've talked, Ashwin a little bit, Chahar, Deepak Chahar, as we mentioned, Yuzvendra Chahal missing out a little bit. I'm thinking who else? Shikhar Dhawan missed out, which I know you're not surprised about.
Panji, your favorite player, Sanju
Samson, or Sanju Samson, as we call him. Anyway, Sanju Samson missed out a lot, right? So I guess overall, I'll just say before we get into a couple of the specifics, shows you the unbelievable depth of white ball cricket in India, right? You could go through, I mean, I would not want to be a selector right now. Let's put it that way. It is an incredibly tough decision. You have this whole C team essentially who played, as you said, in Sri Lanka, many of whom did unbelievably well. And even though that result wasn't great for us, just an outstanding showcase of individual performances. So tough overall, not an easy job. No matter who we left out, somebody would have been unhappy. And so, I mean, looks like a solid side, but some surprises.
Yeah, and I have a theory that you should just take the Mumbai Indian side and replace the foreign players, and you have a pretty good Indian cricket team.
That's the scary thing about Mumbai, man. Anyway, we'll talk IPL next, but yeah.
Yeah, so talk me through your top four, Ashwin. Let's start with the batting. Of course, no Shikhar Dhawan. He's been left out of the T20 squad. There's no Sanju Samson. So Rohit and Virat opening batting because they hinted at that last year.
Yeah, unquestionably for me. I think we've gone back and forth about where Virat specifically bats, but I think Rohit and Virat have to open.
Okay, who bats 3 and 4? Because, and I specifically asked because I would like to fit Ishan Kishan somewhere into the squad because he's a left-hander.
Yeah.
And there's got to be some value with left hand, right hand, I think.
Yeah, if you put that statement aside, I think you're playing Sky at 3 and Kishan at 4. But there's probably a world where, again, depending on when the first wicket falls, if it's early versus late, if there are bowlers who we think a lefty can do more damage to, I think you might flex those two. So you might have Kishan at 3 and Sky at 4. This all doesn't. My initial cut has no space for KL Rahul, which is a whole problem on its own. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's the exact question I was coming to. Where does KL fit into this? Because there are some people putting KL right at the top of the order with Rohit, Kohli at 3, Sky at 4, and then Kishan misses out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's 4 righties, so we need to figure out how to fit Kishan in, I think.
For me, KL is an unbelievable player, no question, but it's when you think about composition and to win against sides like England and the West Indies who have these big hitters, I think actually a lot of it, you need the younger guys who hit the ball further. But I think a lot of it comes down to, does Kohli feel like he needs that 6th bowler? Because he's been very vocal about needing a 6th bowling option, right? So again, straight math, 7 through 11 have to bowl. If your number 6 guy needs to bowl, that means your 6 and 7 need to be Hardik and Jadeja, right? Both bowlers who can bat, essentially. Yep. Right?
Yeah.
And so then how do you, let's say 6 and 7 are Hardik and Jadeja. We'll talk bowlers next. Then what is your top 5? Then my top 5 becomes Rohit,
so the question
Kohli,
there is,
Sky, Kishan,
are we
Pant.
assuming Pant walks into the top 5 at the expense of Rahul?
I think if between Pant, so I'm distilling this live on air real time, but Pant, Kishan and Rahul are fighting for 2 spots. You don't need 2 wicket keepers. I think India has sort of suggested or hinted or basically said upright that Pant is the first keeper of choice. I don't know if that's true across all formats, but I think that's the question mark. Kishan, Pant and Rahul fighting for 2 spots.
Fair enough. I think Jadeja and Pandya definitely 6 and 7, right? Who are your bowlers? Bumrah's sealed a spot. He's definitely
no question.
Bhuvi is your second opener?
Bhuvi is my second opener because he bats at 8. So
right. Okay.
In a world where you need to pick 4 bowlers, but like England bats to 10, sometimes England bats to 11, and all that. I think Bhuvi at 8, and he's looked good. He looked good in his comeback, right? As he's come back into the Indian side, and of course playing the IPL and stuff. So Bhuvi at 8, and then 9, 10, 11, one of them is Bumrah, yes.
Right. So how many bowlers have we got space for? 2 more, right?
2 more. I think so. If we already got Jadeja as one spinner, a lot of it depends on the UAE pitches, etc. I think Rahul Chahar should walk into the side, and I think you need a leggy. Let me start there. And I would have had Chahal walk into the side, to be honest, personally. But given the choice, obviously, they've made to not get him in the squad, and the only leggy I think we have in our squad is Rahul Chahar, I think he walks into the side. And so then for me, that number 11
Chakra bowls
slot,
some mystery, right?
So for me,
Chakra
that number
bowls some mystery
11
spin.
is either Chakra, Varun Chakravarti, if you need that mystery spin, or you bring in a Shami or Shardul if he makes it from the reserves, or a Deepak Chahar if you need that third quick. But honestly, you have, if Hardik is consistently bowling 5 overs, in the UAE, you're probably going 2 seamers, 2 spinners, and then Jadeja and Hardik to round you out. So yeah, I hadn't thought about it much, to be honest. So we were living that. You were in my brain in real time on YouTube. So that's how we're going.
No, it's great. We're just winging it. It's fantastic. But I think the Shami selection is a weird one. I haven't worked that out, to be honest. Maybe they've gone for a bit more pace because Chahar and Shardul are both a bit slower. I think they're backups for Bhuvi probably. So maybe Shami gets in with Boom and Bhuvi, and depending on the nature of the pitch, if there's a bit more pace in it or it's a better batting track, maybe Kohli will go with the pace instead of playing in Ashwin. When does he play Ashwin? And there was a great comment by Archit Puri which said, is it a coincidence that the 2 best YouTubers are both called Ashwin? So comment on that, please, as well.
What a lovely response. That is great. I mean, I don't ever claim to be either as an athlete or as a YouTuber anywhere near Ravi Ashwin, but what a lovely compliment. I think the only place my namesake Ashwin actually gets selected is for sides with 3 or more lefties. So if you think about, and
so England.
So Malan, Stokes, Ali, Morgan, and maybe Karan. That's 5 in your top 8. I think that's where Ashwin can be devastating. So I honestly need to go through the rest of the squads to see which ones are lefty heavy, etc. I know South Africa has a couple. And so that's where he's in the squad. He's just strategic, right? I mean, Ashwin, we love him for Delhi. He's just a smart cricketer. He outthinks the opposition. And we know he's devastating against lefties. So that's where I think that comes from.
I think the only question mark for me is his fitness and whether he's going to be a liability in the field. Maybe he isn't. He looked pretty fit while he's probably doing a lot of laps while he was waiting to play a test match, right?
He had a lot of downtime, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting that the 2 weapons that we had produced, the weapons of mass destruction that we had in Kulcha and Kuldeep and Chahal, Kulcha, neither of them have made it into the squad like less than 2 years after we played them as match winners in the in the World Cup 2019, right? So it's almost like we're back to 2017 with Jadeja and Ashwin being the 2 frontline spinners and the preferred spinners. It's a crazy roller coaster, right? Like it's a roller coaster for fans as well as the players, clearly, Ashwin.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And that's, again, comes back to the depth of bowling we have. When you have people performing, you don't get a long leash. And I think what Varun has been saying this with Test cricket, when you have a huge amount of reserves in the arsenal, you cannot keep giving Rahane this much time. I think, Kuldeep and Chahal ran out of time. I don't think Chahal deserved to necessarily, but that's a different discussion. But you have people like Varun Chakravarti bowling mystery spin, doing great at the highest levels. Rahul Chahar, again, so thrilled for him, right? To be able to compete as a leggy with some of the best leggies in the world and make it. I'm very happy for him. So yeah, you just don't get a lot of opportunities in this setup, and that's tough, but that's the nature of playing for one of the best sides in the world.
Yeah, I mean, the team looks good. The one, I mean, we've got bowlers spinners who like to take the ball in the power play when the batters are going after you. Ashwin, are we missing a left-hand pace option, which India was obsessed with? Remember, we had Khalil, we've had Jaydev Unadkat in the past, we've had Chetan Sakaria, we've had Nattu. I mean, where's Natarajan gone? Where he's just disappeared. Yorker Natarajan, that's what we were looking forward to.
That's a great question, actually. I forgot about Natarajan. As we were thinking about omissions from the side and who left, I was also thinking like, is Prithvi Shaw missed out a little bit? Like you could argue he was in the consideration set, etc. But I was not thinking about Natarajan. It's a great question. We went from being obsessed with the need for a lefty fast bowler to not having a single one and being okay with it. And I think that may be part of why Jadeja is extra critical. Not that a lefty spinner replaces a lefty quick, but yeah, I think as soon as you have one who's performing at the peak in domestic cricket and IPL, they're going to still have a fast track. But until a Sakaria or a Natkat or Natarajan like continues to show themselves, I think they're going to say, let's pick our best quicks instead of force fitting a left arm quick.
Okay, I think we've discussed pretty much every angle of this team almost threadbare by now. So, Ashwin, I'm going to put you on the spot early on. Is this a World T20 or a T20 World Cup winning squad that the Indian selectors have picked?
I think it's up there. I think it definitely has the ability to win the World T20 this year. That's it.
That's a huge call. That's a huge call. Huge. England Test Series. Kohli's in line to win the IPL as well. He's in the top 4 spots. World T20. He could have a triple crown by the end of this year.
I mean, I love him and I want him to have the double crown, but I don't think I want him to win the IPL. But we'll come to that in our final segment.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that?
No, sorry. I was just saying I love Kohli and I want him to have that triple crown and I want him to win, but I actually want him to have a double crown because I would rather see the IPL
Delhi
come
Capitals.
home to Delhi. Of course. But we'll talk about that in our final segment, won't we?
Absolutely. And on that note, we're going to go into a SIAD strategic timeout for final time, and we will see you straight after this break. Welcome back from that SIAD strategic timeout, and we are now talking about the IPL 2021 Part 2, the restart. We're coming back for toss time, the second innings. There's got to be, is it now called extra second innings? What's happening?
I have no idea. It's the weirdest feeling in the world to like have to relook up the points table. Where were we? Who have we played so far? Who have we not? Like IPL is this blitz. I mean, even the fantasy cricket, I think our leagues will just pick up from where we left off. So, of course, we have our Edges and Sledges listener league that will reintroduce next week, probably. But if you're already in it and playing, just pick up your team and continue. So it's a weird feeling to have taken a hiatus from the IPL and get back into it. But that's the world we live in these days, I guess.
Yes, Ashwin, who's leading the points table? Can you just run us through the points table as it currently stands?
I mean, that feels like you set me up perfectly to say at the top of the points table, and you could see both DJs and my faces and energy, but are the Delhi Capitals side, under the interim leadership at the time of Rishabh Pant, have 12 points from their 8 matches. They have played one more match than the rest of the top 4 teams, so I'll put that out there. CSK and RCB are tied on second with 10 points, but CSK has this unbelievable net run rate because if you start to remember back, they were winning their matches by huge margins. Mumbai Indians never too far away, hovering in 4th place with 8 points. The Royals and Punjab Kings are tied for 5th with 6 points, but were not looking great prior to the hiatus. Breaks do funny things. And then languishing way at the bottom are KKR with just 2 wins out of 7, only 4 points, and Hyderabad with just the 1 win. So at this point, a lot of work for KKR and Hyderabad, and to an extent Punjab. Rajasthan will be fighting with Mumbai for that 4th spot. But again, enough cricket left, right? Half the league, one match short of half the league is left. And so a lot can change.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully a lot doesn't change and the Delhi Capitals continue at the top. But Ashwin, there was some news around the captaincy. Let's talk about the player moves. What has changed since, when was it? April, May that we were talking about the IPL? What has changed since then? I mean, Pant it remains Delhi Capitals captain, even though Iyer is back. Ashwin, is that a mega auction move? Are they planning to not retain our Seat boy Shreyas Iyer?
So the message has been that it's because Iyer just hasn't played competitive cricket in a while. So the message has been we want him to get back into the groove and give him time to focus on the cricket versus having to come back, focus on rehab, like getting back into cricket after a while away and leading. I think you read between the lines perfectly, right? With 3 retentions, despite being skipper, does Iyer make the cut is a question that the Delhi management is definitely thinking about. And it's insane to be thinking about it and disappointing for him, but it's not wrong, right? You have to believe a player like Rabada for sure will be retained and Pant will be retained. So then where do you go with that third slot? Does Iyer make it? And therefore, making Pant captain might be a signal of that. But also he did well. Let's be clear, right? As skipper, Delhi is leading the table. So there's probably a little bit of an element of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just stick to what the plans that worked and we'll see where we go.
Ashwin, we're getting some abuse for not taking questions from the chat.
Oh, geez.
All right. I think we're super technologically challenged, guys. I barely know how to put Zoom through to YouTube. I've got a phone over here scrolling.
It's hard enough.
We are not professionals. We do this on the side. So we're trying our best. Ashwin will take some questions at the end and we'll work through this. Thank you guys all for tuning in, man. It means a lot to us, of course.
Let me go through them really quickly. A couple.
Okay, let's do it.
One, we talked Natarajan for the T20. Ruben has said Nattu had an injury and an operation. So it's more that than anything else, which is good. A lot of people generally agreeing with us about Amit is agreeing with us on IPL didn't cause the test series thing. Some people, Vijit is saying it did cause a little bit of a conflict, but blaming it is stupid. We're hearing that Washington Sundar had an injury. We did not talk about him in the T20 set. That's just, again, a reminder of the depth. But Sundar was a fixture in this T20 squad. And for the World Cup, we didn't talk about him, but that's a good caveat as well. Lots of people weighing in with their first 11s for the T20. And then someone just says Shreyas should get his captaincy back. But of course, at some point now, a couple of nice people are weighing in and giving us compliments. So thank you all for tuning in. Apologies for getting distracted and not looking at the chat for a little bit.
And I've just seen Asjad is here as well, and I'm going to be speaking to him on Friday or awesome. Later on in the week. So that's really cool. You guys should check out his channel as well. Yeah, and Ajit Prasad says, love the show. We love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. But where were we? We were talking about the movers and shakers, the people that they've picked up, the people that have opted out. Besto, Vokes, and Malan have all just opted out of the IPL. Ashwin, firstly, is that a reaction to India not playing the final test? There were reports that they are pissed off that the last test didn't happen. There were Indian players who were maskless and were traveling around Manchester even though there was a COVID test. Now they've gone to the UAE. That UAE, there's some serious hate going on over here for the IPL. And these guys have actually said, we don't want the money. We're not going to play, which is pretty serious decision, man.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of things, right? Are you now saying those 3 players are putting the World Cup ahead of the IPL, which again they reserve the right to do? But was it just opportunistic for them to make it seem like they're annoyed at the India team and everything that happened, and they're pulling out? They haven't given an official reason, have they? I think we've just heard that they're out, and so he just decided not to travel for the remainder of the IPL. Now, we're assuming it's because they're annoyed about the 5th test, etc. But it's very possible they want also these are human beings, professionals, want time with their family, time to recover, and then give themselves more time with the England training setup for the World T20. So why is nobody arguing, did the England players make the right call? Why are they, like, the IPL is a paying job for them, and that you're not showing up suddenly just ruins the structure of your team, makes it harder for coaches, managers, your team players. But now they've made those choices. So
yeah, absolutely. And you heard it when Ravi Shastri said bubble, 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 bubble. We thought he's talking about champagne. He was talking about the COVID bubble. But anyway, Liam Livingston, Ashwin, that for me, having watched this guy smash the ball in the 100 and score 100 against Pakistan, that is a huge boost for the Rajasthan Royals, who've lost Archer, have lost Stokes. Stokes isn't playing the World T20 by the way. He's not playing the IPL. He's not in the squad for the World T20. They've deferred the decision on him at the moment. And Liam Livingstone, I think, is going to set the IPL alight, Ashwin. He is a fantastic striker of that cricket ball. So for me, that's the guy to watch this IPL, or this half IPL.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't get to watch a lot of him, but from the highlights and from reading, etc., a big win for the Royals, who have looked poor, who haven't looked great coming into this IPL. And so in the first half, not coming into, but in the first half, they didn't look great. So a big win for them. I think a lot of other interesting sort of selections, right? If you look at some of the other changes that have happened recently, just this morning, as soon as Bairstow was out, Sharfain Rutherford has been drafted in for Hyderabad. So that's an interesting win. Then Rajasthan has also brought in Evan Lewis and O'Shane Thomas. Who else do we
These are
got?
some serious names, man. Evan Lewis was in that Mumbai team that was in the documentary as well, right? He was the one forced to play, although he was injured.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you're right. So lots of big names, lots of interesting things. Adil Rashid, another big one, right? Leg spinner, England leg spinner. First time he's playing the IPL in a while. Has he ever played before? I don't remember.
No, he hasn't. Who's he gone to? Adil?
He's with Punjab Kings for Jai Richardson.
Fair
Pat
enough.
Cummins is also out. So Tim Southee has come back in. He's obviously played the IPL before. Andrew Ty is out. Tabriz Shamsi is playing, which we seem like we have a personal connection to for some reason on this podcast. So Shamsi is playing because some of our viewers think he has a resemblance to our third co-podcaster who isn't here today, Varun. Glenn Phillips is also at Rajasthan. Basically, Rajasthan has made a ton of great signings. So a ton, absolutely unbelievable. RCB got in Tim David, as we talked about, of course, the Singapore-born cricketer, and then Hasaranga and Chamira. So just a lot of changes. I'm just going through this list, and there have been a lot of changes. So it's going to be interesting to see continuation of this, but of the IPL. But teams will look very, very different, right?
Yeah. Do you expect the quality of the IPL to drop, Ashwin, at all with these changes? I mean, all the names you've spoken of, these guys could have easily played the IPL in the first round. Maybe they didn't fit in the team composition or something. But
I think you could easily... Yeah, I think they could easily be first choice IPL players for the most. So there's a couple of big names we'll miss, right? We mentioned Cummins and Bairstow, and who are like IPL stalwarts. We'll miss a little bit of that, but I don't think the actual quality of cricket will drop because all these guys are magnificent players. And
so now I'm going to put you on the spot for the second time in this episode. You've already called the World T20 or the World T20 World Cup for India, which is a huge call a few months out. But two things. One, who's going to win the IPL? And two, we're still a bit far away from the World T20. Which players, Ashwin, who are not in that India squad and are not in their national squad, someone like a Faf du Plessis, for example, who's scoring runs for fun in the CPL at the moment, but has not been picked, and Imran Tahir, who's not been picked in his national squad and is very disappointed. Who are the players that are going to put their hand up, Ashwin, and say, you've made a massive mistake not taking me to the World T20 or the T20 World Cup? I keep calling it the World T20. But two questions, winner and the players to watch.
I mean, I've now made this decision, and I'm going to stick to it on this podcast, that I'm going to declare my prediction to be what I want to happen, not what I think will happen. So I'm predicting the winner for the first time ever will be the Delhi Capitals. And that way, if I'm right, great.
That's the first time I've heard this on the show. It's the first time we've predicted a DC win on the show, no?
I mean, I've predicted it. I don't know if I speak for all of us, but I think, and there's a great comment that just come in that Dhawan will be back with a vengeance. So I think Dhawan might be one of those guys who's going to try to prove himself. And so I think so Delhi's going to win. To your second question, I'm not quite as close to all the other squads. So I think Tahir and Faf are interesting ones that you flagged. I haven't read much about the other squads, to be honest. I think as I go down the list for India, I think Dhawan, Iyer, who's in the standby, but I think they're both going to be fighting to try to sneak their way into the lead squad. I think Chahal, who we talked about, 100%. And then somebody like a Shaw, and I think a Gill has just declared that he will be fit for the IPL. So although he hasn't been part of the full setup, etc., or the white ball setup, I think those are the guys who will be gunning to try to squeeze their way into the World T20 squad.
And a Samson and a DK and a Krunal, those three guys as well.
Not DK for me. So, Krunal will probably try, but I don't think I think in the Mumbai setup, he honestly just doesn't get enough of an opportunity to shine. That's how strong Mumbai is. So I don't think Krunal will show up. Samson, I'm going to say it again. The resumption means a continuation of Samson. He's going to make a century in his first game back. People are going to think this guy's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We should never have dropped him. And then he's going to have a string of single-digit scores. We've done this before. We've been down this road. So this is just how it rolls.
I think that's the top tip for the week, guys. Make sure you make Sanju Samson your captain in the first couple of games of the season, and then drop him for the rest in your fantasy team. And we're going to be resuming fantasy as well, right? The same thing is going to be kicked back up. So if you joined our league earlier, we're going to be playing fantasy again for the rest of this IPL. And if you didn't join the league, what are you waiting for? Ashwin will give you the code in the show notes. Wow, it has been some week, guys. Vijit Ijaz Ali says dream collab, Edges and Sledges and the Great Cricketer.
Awesome.
We've got some amazing. Yeah, we're up for it, man. We're always up for it. Yeah, we've got a ton of great comments, guys. Thank you for joining us this week. It has been a pretty emotional week without having actually watched a test match for a change. You don't quite know what to make of that cancellation in a way, but as they say, the show must go on. This show has clearly gone on. We've managed. Guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel so that you're notified of any new episodes as they come out or when we go live. Make sure you subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Acast, wherever else you get your podcast. Leave us a review. And yeah, this is the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast brought to you by Seat Tires. Stay safe, guys, and we will see you next week once the IPL